I've still got my 2004 Volkswagen Jetta, and I've started to smell exhaust in the cabin when I'm driving. So I'm going to look for an exhaust leak. I've also got a turbo leak that I want to look for. I think it might be related, it might be in the same spot, and so I wanted to talk about that too. So I'm going to show you how to go about diagnosing an exhaust leak and walk you through what I had to do to fix mine. Let's get started. Now, to figure out where your exhaust leak's coming from, a trick that I've learned is that you can look for it just like you'd look for a leak on a tire. And so I've got my shop vac here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to swap this hose so it's exhausting instead of sucking, and I'm just going to shove this pipe in my tailpipe, and we're going to turn it on, and then we can spray some soapy water around the spots where I think it might be leaking. We look for bubbles, and we can see if we can find the leak. So let's do that. Now, to get these nuts off, I didn't show it on video, but what I ended up doing is you take some really good penetrating oil. A lot of people swear by PB Blast. I like Thrust. Just soak those nuts as well as you can. I let them soak for about a day. And then just take your time with it. You have to be real slow with it. Soak it, let it sit for a few hours, soak it again, let it sit for a few hours. And then I got on there with a wrench and I just barely moved it a little bit. I broke all of them just barely free. Again, take your time with it. Let it sit even longer after that. Soak it with some more oil. You really want to get as much penetrating oil in there as possible, because if you break off one of those studs, it's going to add hours to the job. You're going to have to start drilling stuff out, replace the studs. If you have an acetylene torch or something like that to actually heat up those nuts to try to break them free, then by all means. I don't have one, and I managed to get mine free just with oil. So again, take your time, really let them soak, and really recognize that if these things break, it's going to be a real pain in the butt. Now that you've got those nuts out, the next thing you want to do is get this whole downpipe pulled away so you can have room to get the new gasket in. And to do that, you have to remove this clamp, but this clamp is well rusted in there from lots of years of going down the road and crap getting in there. And so what we're going to try to do is just get a grinding wheel inside here and here just to cut off these bolts that are holding this clamp together, and then we can remove it. Obviously, you're going to have to replace that clamp. Won't be able to reuse it, but they're only about 10 bucks. So let's get that guy cut off. Before you start taking this pipe down, you want to make sure you undo these little clips here that hold your O2 sensors in. The wires there, you don't want to stress the wires when you take the pipe down. Now that we've got this off, the whole pipe just drops down and we are free to put in our new gasket. Now, for the top gasket, we have to take out a lot of this piping and hoses. Somewhere under this heat shield here we have to get into. So we're gonna have to do a little bit of extra work here just to take out all this to get access. So let's get started on doing that. This heat shielding here just has these little buttons that you can just pop open, and that exposes a lot more of the clamps that you need to get into. There's some clamps here. There's some more down in here that clamp on this entire pipe. We might have to go down even further. There's some more heat shielding down there. There's probably more clamps that hold on this big pipe. We're just trying to get this out so that we can take the heat shield out so that we can get access to the bolts to the top of the turbo. Now, from under the car, you can see the turbo coming down. There was some more heat wrap around this section here that I took off. It looks like there's a little clamp that's holding this on here, and also down here there's another clamp. I'm going to go ahead and remove this the splash guards down here just to give a little bit more access to these pipes, to make it a little bit easier. So just some T25 screws that I've got to remove, and that's that. All right. Now already, just like that, you can see we have access to these 3 bolts here. I'm going to try to remove this heat shield though. It feels like there's one bolt right here maybe holding that on. So you can see I've got my whole air intake out. There's actually a little O-ring on the end of this that I'm probably going to end up replacing. But if you look down here now, you can finally see I can get access to this bolt right here, which should let me remove my heat shield. So you can see there's not really access to get this bolt out. I just don't have the clearance to be able to pull it out without taking out the whole turbo, I guess. I don't really know how to get it out. So I can move it now, so I can actually get access to the nuts in there. So let's see if we can get this turbo off. Oh, there's one. I've got one of these little wobble extensions so I can get this closest one this way. Is this one already loose? This one felt like it was already loose. That could be part of my problem here. And I'm gonna get a little oil in there because these feel pretty squeaky. There's one. There's two. And here's three. Now these are TTY bolts. You're going to want to order new ones because they're not meant to be reused. You also want to get these original washers. They don't come with it. So this is the orientation that this came out of. It's like this. You can see mine has cracks on it already. There's a crack here, there's a crack here. This is the orientation that it came out though. It's supposed to be something like that. Slides in just like this. So this is definitely one of the sources of my turbo leaks. Because the engine's trying to push through this, but a lot of it's leaking out, and so the turbo can't actually get enough power to actually push air into the intake. So we're going to order a new gasket here. We're going to get a new gasket for the downpipe, a couple new O-rings, new hardware, of course, and I'll put links to everything in the description for all the parts you need. But now it's just time to wait for parts, and we'll put it all back together. So I've got my new gasket and my new bolts. However, I've read a lot, and we saw when I took mine out that some of these bolts can work themselves loose. Now I'd love to just use like some kind of thread lock on here, but I don't know of a thread lock that's meant to handle exhaust level temperatures. Like it can get up to like 1200 degrees or something, and most thread locks will just break down at that kind of temperature. That's how you're supposed to actually break them free. Now, I don't want that. But I did read that some people use this exhaust putty, and what you do is you put it just on the head of the bolt and on both sides of the washer, just to keep the bolts from coming free. You don't want to put it on the threads because I don't think you'll ever actually get them free ever again. If somebody's going to do this job later, you don't want them to hate you. But if you put them under the head itself, then a socket should be able to actually break that free. You're not extending the torque all the way to the end of the bolt. One of the first things I want to do is just make sure that there isn't any oil. I don't know if they have any kind of coating on here to keep these from rusting. So I'm just going to make sure that these are all nice and clean. Next, I'm going to open this thing up. Comes with a couple little pouches in here. The directions say to knead this before opening, and then we can just spread it on wherever we need it. So I'm just going to mix this up. Take a pair of scissors, and I'm just going to make a nice little applicator here. I just got an old piece of cardboard here. I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of this out here. So I've got something to work with. And I'm just going to spread this around here. I just want to get it on the washer and on the head of the bolt itself. So now we have our exhaust putty spread out onto the heads of these bolts, and we're going to go ahead and put them in the car. Because I got some oil in here to try to get those bolts free, I am just going to hit it with some brake clean just to try to get all that out. Brake clean shouldn't leave any residue or anything, so I'm just going to try to get that surface as clean as possible, and then we can put in our new gasket. Right, so again, the orientation is like this. We're just going to slide this gasket in. I've got my torque wrench here. It should be about 30 foot-pounds for these stretch bolts. I'm going to get a different kind of wobble extension on here. This will make my torque reading a little bit less accurate, but I'm going to get it as close as I can. So I've got the gasket installed now. I'm going to go ahead and get this heat shield back installed and start putting together all of the air intake side of things. To get this O-ring off, I'm just going to use a little pick. Just get that out of there. This O-ring comes off. My new one can just slide on. There's already a little bit of oil and stuff on here to help lubricate and guide that in. Now I can go ahead and slide that back in there. Next I can take this hose, the outlet of the turbo. Next thing I want to do is get some neverseas on these studs to help out the next guy, and then we could put on our new gasket and our nuts and get our downpipe reattached. Switch into a deep socket now to finish them off. So you've got our new exhaust clamp. Just when you put this in, make sure that you leave it at an angle such that the next guy can cut these off if these start to rust. So I took it for a drive. Everything seems to be running great. I don't smell exhaust in the cabin at red lights anymore. Turbo seems to be running a lot better. And so overall, I'm super happy to get this job done. I didn't have to weld anything. I was kind of nervous about having to do that. I don't know how many of you still run Mark IV Jettas, but hopefully this helps some of you. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I hope you found this helpful.